Hello and welcome to the PopCult channel with your hosts Tommy and Tyler. Here at PopCult, we talk about films, TV, gaming, and entertainment news. And in today's video, we're going to talk about The Electric State, a new Netflix movie that is breaking a few different records, not all of them good. All right, and here we are. How are you, man?
Yeah, very good, very good. I actually just finished watching the film earlier.
And you're doing good?
I watched it in two parts, actually. I put it on last night and fell asleep after about 15-20 minutes, and then watched the rest of it today.
Was it the fault of the movie, or do you think you were just tired?
No, I could have been watching Apocalypse Now last night, and I would have fallen asleep in 10 minutes, I think. I was just very tired, but
it didn't help. The movie didn't help, I guess.
Oh, no. It certainly didn't help, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. We thought it would be cool to talk about it, not just because, it's a big Netflix movie and, it's been in the internet discussion as of late, but also because of all the conversation that surrounds the movie and surrounds kind of the streaming wars. And
probably more interesting than the film itself.
Yeah,
the controversy around it.
Do you know how much it cost? How much this movie cost?
Yeah, so because I think that's probably the main reason it's probably getting shared around as much. I watched. I think I've seen a couple reviews already when the film first came out, and it was that was the main topic of conversation. Will this be the biggest flop of the year? Because it was reported budget of $320 million.
$320 million, which is probably it makes it one of the most expensive films ever made. The Electric State. It was an original Universal Pictures movie, but then the distribution rights were acquired by Netflix, which took over in 2022. And it's again, we'll get into it. It's not a horrible movie. It's not an offensive movie. It's it's a nothing movie.
Yeah, which if anything, it was worse.
It's probably worse. Yeah,
I was hoping it was going to be really bad, and it was going to entertain me in that sense. But it was just so paint by the numbers.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to me. All these different companies bleeding money, competing for our attention, trying to make the next big thing. We were talking about Apple TV losing money. Severance is doing well, yes, but they are literally losing $1 billion a year in investments for Apple TV Plus, and all these huge projects with big stars hardly making any noise. No one cares. I guess everyone is on their TikTok.
And I assume it's kind of similar. Well, I've seen reports as well. It's definitely similar for Netflix that each year their own production of their own sort of titles is putting them in an absolute financial pit at the moment. So
yeah, I don't know how this model is sustainable on the long term. Clearly they were kind of trying to make something big. They literally had the recipe for success. They got Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, who, for those who don't know, are the writers for the more recent Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame, and also a bunch of other blockbusters and superhero movies. So, people who know what they're doing when it comes to, entertainment, movies and TV. Then you get Joe and Anthony Russo, which, of course, they are the two directors of those same Avengers movies, which are the biggest movies in terms of box office success of all time. And on top of that, you get Chris Pratt, and you get a big marketable star like Millie Bobby Brown. You get Ki Hui Kwan, which he won an Oscar a couple of years ago. Is very well beloved. He's in a bunch of stuff now. You get Stanley Tucci. You get Giancarlo Esposito. You get
Woody Harrelson,
and Anthony Mackie. I didn't know this. Did you know this? Do you know who
which
he plays?
one was Anthony Mackie?
Try and guess. You get fucking Captain America to play a character in this. He's just unrecognizable. Anyone could have played that role.
Is he the guy Is he the guy with the baseball bat?
No, he's one of the main robots. Is the Chris Pratt's friend.
Okay, right. I was wondering who that voice was. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just so distorted. You don't even like. I had
No,
to go
that
back.
seems really pointless.
I had to go back and check a scene to see if I could recognize the voice. And once you know, you can kind of tell, but like, I don't know. So yeah, you get all these talent, all these people, you throw $320 million at this project and you think you're making a movie. I don't know. This is another one of those weird streaming movies. I don't know if you feel the same. Like I feel like sometimes when I watch a streaming movie, they don't really feel like a real movie.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you know if this had any theatrical release at all?
I'm sure in the US, they
Yeah,
had a few
some.
screenings, but I think it's just a streaming movie.
I'll tell you what, this is. I know exactly what you mean. It feels very much in line with, like you remember that Amazon Prime Red One, that Christmas film with The Rock, and
Was that Amazon? Wasn't it just distributed by Amazon? Was it made by Amazon?
I thought that was one of their original titles, that
Yeah,
Red One
I wouldn't be
film, and it's
surprised.
like
The Rock, Chris Evans.
Evans, yeah, and that was also like a like 300, 400 million budget movie or whatever. Um, and then you have like, do you remember way back when like I think Netflix spent loads of money on Bright?
Bryce,
With,
yeah, that's one that came to mind watching this. That was the first big blockbuster, we could say, movie that they
yeah,
tried
have
to
their own
make.
like produced stuff, yeah. And but I tell you, I think this one it has a lot of similarities with those sort of films, but this one, at least in the premise and the scope of the film and who they got involved, this one makes more sense to me. Like it's based off some, I think it was based off a comic book.
It's a
Um,
graphic novel,
yeah,
which
okay.
can hardly it hardly counts as a graphic novel. I think like it's basically a collection of illustrations, kind of like showing this post-apocalyptic version of Earth where these robots and this technology kind of like rots away in these fields. It's very serene, very very interesting art actually. If you look it up, yeah, it's that there's no real story that they draw from. It's just that like as you can tell, they made
Okay,
it
so
up.
it's not the story's not adapted from the graphic novel. It's the story's original, but the world is.
Very few elements I assume. Like I haven't read it. I've only seen a few images. But yeah, I don't think there was a story really that they had to adapt, which makes sense because the story itself is so by the numbers and so uninspired, I think.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, this one makes a bit more sense to me why it would get the investing. It's got a bit more of a scope of a film that could have a sequel and could have a franchise or whatever. It has a lot more potential than like throwing 300 million at a Christmas movie with The Rock in it like that. Those choices really like don't make sense to me. Whereas this to me is they threw the bucket at it, and I don't think it personally works, but I could see at least a bit of the potential in this one.
Oh, definitely. When I first heard about it, and especially when people started like talking about it, like reviews coming out, I was like, how are people being so mean? Why? Like this looks like a fine, decent family movie. The robots look cute, the actions looks decent. I didn't find it that interesting, but not even like in a bad way. Like it's just a family movie. Uh,
But it's not really a family movie though. It's very tonally inconsistent when it comes to those things, and it reminded me a lot of actually of have you seen the Fallout TV series?
yes, of course.
It reminded me a lot of that, in where it's this very like dangerous, menacing, post-apocalyptic world, but all the situations and characters are silly and
Cartooning,
caricatured.
yeah.
And it's just in such juxtaposition with that dangerous world at times, and you're like switching between these tonal shifts, and sometimes that can work. And in like the Fallout games, that obviously works really well.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it gave me very much of that feel, and it's
There's no
like
real threat in the words.
no, and it's epitomized so much in so many of the scenes. that I made note of particular scenes. Like there's a bit where they're stuck in this old like rundown circus, and all these scavenger robots are encroaching on them, and it is like it is supposed to be very menacing and dark, and then quick flip the switch, we'll play a Marky Mark song, and it's like disco party, and everyone's joking 2 seconds later.
Yeah, the needle drops were exhausting, I thought.
Yeah, it's got very much of those Marvel like hallmarks of serious moment undercut by comedic moment. And yeah, I'm so done with that formula.
Yeah, I think. Well, it's the two writers who literally wrote the Avengers movie. So,
Yeah.
but this thing that you said kind of like leads me to into this other aspect that I wanted to discuss, which is kind of like a little game that I want to play with you, and I called it "How many movies are in this movie?"
Yeah,
Because there's so many movies in this movie. There's not one singular like original idea, I think.
yeah, yeah,
And this kind of like it was fun at first to kind of like figure out, oh, this clearly took inspiration from this, but then it became annoying when I felt like that was just a hodgepodge of stuff. And
yeah,
it reminded me of when we both went to film school together, and when they teach you how to pitch a movie idea, right? And they tell you that a surefire way to make people understand the concept is to tell them, oh, it's this movie plus this other movie, right?
yeah,
And that's basically how Hollywood does it, especially at this level. There's no room for experimentation when you're putting $320 million in a movie. Your movie needs
yeah,
to be
yeah.
similar to something else that was successful. And I think this,
It's Jurassic Park meets the Avengers.
yeah,
It'll be a
it's,
success. Yeah, yeah,
and we get Chris Pratt to play one of the Velociraptors, and it's gonna make $1 million, $1 billion.
yeah,
And I think this movie is the perfect example of this kind of like this approach. And I thought, let's play this game. Let's name all the movies that we found in this movie.
yeah,
I'll start.
yeah. Go on.
So, Robot Uprising, and also Unstoppable Machine pursuing the protagonist. So it's like kind of like Terminator.
Yeah, yeah.
You already mentioned, post-apocalyptic wasteland. There's a few things that come to mind.
I got a lot of with like the vibe and tone. I got a lot of Ready Player One with it. Also, we have the headsets, etc. But like a lot of pop culture references to like things from the 80s, 70s, and 90s. So yeah,
And Ready Player One alone counts as like two or three movies, because that
yeah,
film is
it is,
itself a hodgepodge of thousands
it
of
is
different films.
reference the movie.
Even the final scene, I guess spoilers, with the brother is very similar to the scene in Ready Player One where the main kid is talking to Mark Rylance, in the simulation.
Yeah.
You mentioned the headset, the drones, all that stuff clearly is Ready Player One inspired. I also felt there was a bit of Tomorrowland. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Didn't That was Chris Pratt, wasn't it?
No, it was. There was another blonde teenager rebel girl and George Clooney, and they go to this ward, and the Hugh Laurie is the evil guy, and it's basically Stanley Tucci in this. Yeah, you mentioned Marvel, so the dialogue in the movie is pretty much discount Marvel.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's Chris Pratt is such playing. He's just playing a very discount version of Star Lord in this
He's
in
playing
this film.
Star Lord.
He's playing Star Lord from like, is it in Endgame where he's a bit mopey, and I think after Gamora's dead and he's a bit of a loser. Like he's playing that version of Star Lord basically.
Yeah,
And usually I quite like Chris Pratt and stuff, but he was so like, yeah, I don't know, it stunk of him just showing up for the paycheck, and he's just doing the bare minimum. But maybe that's the script.
he is in a bunch of these nothing streaming movies. He was in the Tomorrow War. Was it the name? Like it
Oh,
was
so
like
that's what I'm
another.
getting confused with. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was
My
another
war.
nothing film that I saw that I left my brain 5 minutes later. But this kind of dialogue, this kind of like bantery exchange, it's serviceable in something like Infinity War, because you have all these different big personalities from other movies, and they're clashing, and you have Doctor Strange interacting with Tony Stark, and so the snarky comment makes sense. But here it feels just so out of place. Like every time they try to make a joke, it just doesn't land. I remember you sending me a clip before even we watched the movie. There was this clip of Chris Pratt being like, "Oh, do you think if you think that my friend here is gonna put you into this van and carry us around on his shoulder, you are mistaken, girl." And then the next scene is, of course, them in the van,
I'm pretty
and
sure. I'm pretty sure that scene's in the trailer as well, and it's like, right, well, that's the peak of the comedy, and it was even worse when I saw it in the actual film and I knew what was coming. I was like, this just the setup and the payoff of the whole thing is so bad.
it's such good writing because he said this is not going to happen, but then it happened. So I
Yeah,
feel like that's genius. Didn't you get that? Maybe you didn't get it.
went straight over my head.
But so another one is Kid Cosmo, the main robot guy, the one with the brother inside. We'll get to that, I guess.
Yeah,
But he only talks in like pre-recorded lines, which is very
yeah,
Bumblebee in the Transformers movies.
like using the radio to use
Yeah.
conversations. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then you have cute robots and kind of like human robot interaction, kind of like Star Wars, I guess. Even though this is more Guardians of the Galaxy with the needle drops that are very Guardians coded.
Yeah.
So yeah, a bunch of different movies, better movies, I should say, just referenced endlessly. And
Yeah, and that's fine. Like you said, we can, Ready Player One I'd say was a much better film. It's not great or anything, but I
yeah,
think it was much better than
it
this. And
understands the assignment. It
yeah,
gives you the
yeah,
little nostalgia that you want from a product like this, and there's a decent enough story. Yeah, I didn't love it, but it's definitely better than this. This just feels like regurgitated ideas.
yeah. Well, do you want to give a little breakdown of the plot then?
Of course, if I remember what happens, because so we have Millie Bobby Brown, and she has a brother, and they love each other, and it's so nice. It's such a lovely relationship, right? And the brother is a genius. The brother is just the most insanely brilliant young mind that you've ever seen. And she's like, "Oh, you should go to college." And he's like, "I don't want to go to college. I want to stay with you because I love you so much." And then she's like, "Oh, but you should go because college is important." And then there's a war. There's a big war with these robots. This is an Elseworld version of Earth where, like, in the 90s, we have a bunch of these animatronic robots, which was very weird because they don't really explain. Like, they mentioned Disney, they mentioned the fact that, they were born as animatronics in parks, but then they became kind of like mascots, and every aspect of life was kind of like jobs that the human didn't want to do,
Yeah,
like labor, and then at some point robots were like, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't want to be slaves anymore. We want to live our own lives." And so a war starts, and Chris Pratt was in the war, and he blinks. There's this scene at the beginning where he's like interviewed. It's like, "Oh, they don't sleep, they don't have to eat, they don't
yeah.
blink."
That,
And I
that was
blink, and
bad.
then I was like, "Okay, this is the level of dialogue that we're gonna
Yeah,
get from this
yeah.
movie."
Already there was in that bit where they're doing that big exposition dump and we're getting a lot of like old newsy type footage. There was so many bits in this, so I was already like rolling my eyes. You had the Russo cameo.
Oh yeah, that was expected and not
Does he do
welcome.
that for all his films? I know he did it in Avengers, but
Yeah, he's he
yeah.
always does a little bit of acting on the side. He's good at everything. That guy.
And then we had the Bill Clinton deep fake
Oh,
as well,
dude,
which
yes,
was weird.
that was so weird. And then we got Stanley Tucci as Evil Man, who's like, "Hey, I don't trust robots, but I have this technology, and this technology is amazing, and it's gonna help us defeat the robots." And then this technology is basically these VR headsets that allow people to, live their lives in this digital recreation of the world, pretty much like Ready Player One.
Yeah.
And so the war stops, and they send all these robots into this walled off area in the deserts, and they just have to live there and never leave. And life sucks, but everyone is happy in their simulation. Millie Bobby Brown, she's an orphan now. Her brother is dead. Her family is dead. She's with this horrible guy who is like kind of like her foster dad, I guess.
She says her foster dad at one point, but it's very weird. Like they don't, because they establish when we first see him. She comes in back into the house. He's got his headset on and he's
Yeah,
doing whatever, and they sort of have a bit of a bantery, like joking relationship, and she's taking the mick out of him.
yeah,
And then she walks out, and you're like, okay, well, they have somewhat of a connection with each other.
relationship.
And,
Yeah,
yeah, and it's like not a bad relationship, but she immediately turns on her her foster father and betrays him for the robot she had just met, who she thinks is her brother, obviously. So I found that relationship very weird at the beginning.
like when you go to the cinema and you watch a movie and you feel like they definitely had to kind of like edit this down because it was too
Yeah,
long and I wanted to fit more screenings. But that's something that you usually don't get with streaming movies. More often than not, you get the opposite problem. Like they are over long because they didn't have any need to really cut the scenes in a way where they just let so many scenes play. I think about a movie like The Irishman, which could have been an hour shorter and nothing would have been lost in my opinion. But like, and
yeah.
this movie feels like maybe so many scenes, especially in the beginning, have been cut. It's so choppily edited. It's so weird. Like you go from one scene to the next, there's not really a flow. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we should have either the film should have either established a better, closer relationship with this foster father at the
Yeah,
beginning, or make it more of a negative relationship,
yeah, just
or they should have highlighted. We should have seen flashbacks of her real parents with her brother to establish that relationship more.
exactly. She also has this rejection for like the headset and technology in general, and you never get a feeling of why. It's just she's different, she's so
And
quirky.
she's just cool.
Yeah, she's
That's it.
just cooler than anyone else, because she's Millie Bobby Brown.
And she also looks about 10 years older than everybody else in her class
It's
as well.
so jarring. Like she can't play a teenager anymore.
No.
I'm worried about Stranger Things 5.
I
Um
haven't. I think I've only ever seen her in Stranger Things.
oh, she was in the Godzilla movies playing a teenager with, an absentee father, and then she was in the movie Damsel with
I
a
only saw
dragon.
clips of Damsel, and that didn't look so great.
Anyway, the movie basically is starts when this weird robot breaks into the house, Millie Bobby Brown's house, and somehow, without even being able to talk, manages to communicate to Millie Bobby Brown that he actually is her brother. Like the
Yeah,
spirit of her brother is living within this weird
he
robot,
grabs like a picture of
and
them two,
points
and he
at it, and
points
then
at
makes the same kind of like gesture with his
yeah.
hands. And this robot is basically an animatronic of the brother's favorite cartoon before the war, before he died, or before as we thought he died, but like we now learn that probably this kid is alive somewhere. Is being experimented on, used by this big company. Stanley Tucci is using him. And so the robot and Millie Bobby Brown embark on this quest to find the body of the brother. And along the way, they run into Chris Pratt and another robot, and they end up in this zone where the robots are, and a bunch of stuff happens, and then they win, and the film ends. How's that for a recap?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, probably, yeah, pretty much that is the that is the gist
And
of it.
Mr. Peanut is there, which I found out is a mascot for a very famous American brand of, I guess, peanut butter or like peanut related
Yeah,
products.
he looks very familiar, like the character.
It's, mascots, like brand mascots, become heroes in this new era of entertainment, which I find thrilling, to be honest. But yeah.
It's just, and I mean that opened the door for a lot of like very bizarre imagery with the robots like going to war, and some of them are like little popcorn machines on wheels or whatever.
Yeah, and everyone has a conscience and like a will. It's so strange. I mean, like, I don't mind it. It's interesting. I wouldn't mind it in a
But
better movie, I guess. But
yeah, I get you. And maybe, they had a really long exposition dump at the beginning, and I think they probably could have fleshed out the world even more in that opening sequence.
totally, totally. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's a weird thing because you have all these resources, as I said, all these big stars, and you make a movie that is just is nothing. It says nothing. It's something that is literally leaving my brain as we're talking about it, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like this is the end of entertainment or like it's the worst movie ever. It's
No,
not.
that, that
It's
happened. That happened ages ago, man.
I don't agree. Like it's a serviceable
I'm
movie,
joking.
and that's kind of as we said, the problem is that it's just serviceable with this amount of money and resources thrown at it. It's just a serviceable movie, and it's not even a kids movie. But I guess when I was a kid, I definitely liked a lot of very bad and very forgettable movies. So it's not like this is a new trend, but
Yeah, but I don't know whether it has that kind of like that like the fun and
yeah,
like the
like
as
Small
some of those.
Soldiers,
Oh, well, I mean, now you're comparing it to like a fucking absolute
Citizen
classic.
Kane.
That's unfair. Yeah, that is the Citizen Kane of kids films. Um, but no, something like I don't know why this was the first one that popped into my head. Do you remember the Van Helsing film?
Oh yeah, sure.
With Hugh Jackman in it. And I think that's kind of like a 12 as well. So it's kind of that borderline like this is. It's like, we're dealing with some darker stuff, but we're also like going to be
It's
campy
fun.
and
Yeah.
fun and entertaining. I'll watch that film now like 10 times over again
It's
than watch it.
amazing. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's the kind of this is a very similar blockbuster. When Van Helsing came out at the time, I doubt it was like proper revered and did that well, but like it's one of those things. It was way more fun to watch, and the bits when it is a bit campy and silly. It pushes that to a degree that it just feels way more like genuine in its tone.
It is. And this goes to show that we are not just two grumpy people who don't enjoy things. We love. I was watching Punisher Warzone the other day for the first time. And that's a
Yeah,
fucking, it's fantastic. It's just so bloody and stupid and so well done. The deaths are so much fun. This movie lacks that kind of personality. Like, I'm not saying I need the robots to kind of like kill people and, eat their brains. But 20 minutes in, I basically predicted the whole movie.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I knew that the kid was probably alive and connected to some machine, and that she would have to find him and then say goodbye to him for good. For some reason they had to say goodbye, and that's exactly what happens. You introduce the character of Giancarlo Esposito, and then you see him kind of like clash with Stanley Tucci. So at the end, it's like, okay, so probably he's gonna redeem himself in some way. Maybe he's gonna go to the side of the robots. He's gonna see their ways, and that's exactly what happens. Chris Pratt, like being Chris Pratt, and the Anthony Mackie robot is like, oh, is the robot dead? No, it's not dead. There's a tinier robot inside, which I thought was cute, but like again,
It was cute,
it's
but it's annoying because that was probably the best moment, like acting wise, when Chris Pratt's like standing over his robot friend when he dies, and I was like, oh, this is nice. Maybe this should have actually happened a bit earlier in the story to give Chris Pratt's character the motivation to. Because then, I mean, you've given us that emotional impact scene, and then literally 2 to 3 minutes later, you're undoing that work and you're turning it into a comedic moment rather, and it just undercuts the dramatic scene that you set up before.
and I feel like that's clearly like a conscious choice by Netflix and whoever is in charge of this kind of decisions, because they are clearly trying to make the most inoffensive movie ever, that can appeal to everyone,
Yeah,
okay.
that's such a good way to describe it. Yeah, we don't want you to be sad for longer than 60 seconds. We'll bring you
Exactly.
back. Don't worry. Yeah, yeah.
and it can appeal to everyone, but no one in the world will really like this movie. I don't see kids today being like, in 10 years, being like, oh, I remember this was my favorite movie when I was a kid. Like, I don't know. And it's not original.
I'd
It's
be
not.
fucking amazed. I'd be amazed if that happens.
I mean, it's the problem with most of these big movies now, that they're not very original, they're not very memorable, and I feel like that there was an article that came out a few months ago where they were basically saying that Netflix is actively trying to make movies that people can follow while they're on their phone or when they're folding laundry. Like, they
Yeah,
they have to repeat stuff, they need to be very clear in what's happening, they need to you know basically guide you through the story. And I don't know, man, this is just so exhausting too. All these things, the fact that we can watch our entertainment at 2 times speed, and they're treating works of art as content, it's just stuff. They're encouraging this, they want us to just uncritically pop something on and just spend 2 hours on their platform, and there's no questions raised, there's no thoughts provoked, and they don't want us to think or experience. They I don't know, they want to consume, they want us to consume. And I'm not saying that the electric state needed to be this incredible statement on politics and capitalism, but it would have been nice if it tried to say something. And I feel like that's the main issue that I have with the movie. It's just that it's so predictable, it's not interesting, and it wasted 2 hours of your life saying nothing.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, and yeah, maybe it is like a you have a like the rose tint of nostalgia when you're watching other films that some films are just like can be mindless entertainment and it's their
Of
popcorn
course.
movies and that's what this is supposed to be. But I just feel like it's yeah, there's no heart or anything to it that can keep you involved other than just the purely spectacle aspects of it, like the robots and the fights and all that stuff. That's really the only kind of redeeming factors here, I thought.
Everything that happens because, oh, we need a funny moment now. Oh, now we had the funny moment, so let's have the heartwarming exchange between the two characters who are warming up to each other. Now we're gonna have a little sad moment, now we're gonna have an argument, because they misunderstood each other, and now we're gonna have funny moment again, and then action. I don't know, like, it feels so manufactured.
Yeah.
And
What was Millie Bobby Brown's arc in this film? I can't remember her character name. And I literally watched it half
Michelle,
an hour ago.
her
Michelle. Yeah. What was her arc in this film? Because I
so
didn't see it.
she has to realize that her brother is dead, and she has to say goodbye. She needs to let go of her grief and move on and become the leader that she knew she could be.
She was
And
already that. She's already a very self-assured, like independent, quite intelligent, brave. She's all these things from the very beginning, and she finishes up as these exact same things in the end.
she's really flawless, isn't she? Like, she doesn't really have something at the beginning where you're like, oh, it's a rough edge that she's gonna need to smooth over by the end of the movie. It's just, and she never really, like, of course you're gonna be grief stricken by the death of your brother. It's not even that long ago that happened. So I don't feel like that's kind of like a character flaw that she needs to overcome. It's
No,
more.
no, that's just a situation she finds herself in, and that's what progresses the plot. But it's yeah, like we said, almost bordering on like potential Mary Sue character here because there is flawless. Um, yeah, and she like yeah, there is at no point where she makes a mistake or anything like that. It's just you know, and it ruins the stakes of the story when we know that everything she does is going to be the right intention. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, she never really. I mean, she could have taken advantage of Chris Pratt or tried to, um, I don't know, manipulate him into helping her, and you can see that she has kind of like a conniving side, but like, that doesn't really happen. She's
Yeah,
she's
yeah, and you sort of bring Chris Pratt's character into the story because he's a bit of a hardened, bit of a sort of like criminal in this underworld,
So
and
hardened.
I mean, well, that's sort of what he's supposed to be anyway. And so when they go on their journey into this, the X zone or whatever it's called, with all the dead robots there, or all the left robots there,
Yeah.
um, we assume, right, okay, his role is going to be sort of the bodyguard here, and he's going to help her, in these moments of conflict throughout. But she can hold her own just as well, or even better than he can in all the sort of action sequences. So it's a bit like, what purpose is he serving other than just being the dumb guy who makes stupid comments along the way?
Yeah. Nothing. It's nothing. It's a nothing movie, man. And
And
we've been
that was
talking about this nothing movie for 40 minutes. So they
and
won. They
that
fucking won.
that epitomized in that scene where it's like the first like real serious like dark scene where Giancarlo Esposito's robot like drops down into Chris Pratt's hideout, and he's taking them down, and he's trying to chase them, and he gets trapped by like a big sort of building claw thing, and it gives the characters a moment to escape, and they're going to escape in these mining carts, and then Chris Pratt pulls out a big set of jangling keys, and he's like slowly pouring through the keys, and then
How many
Billy Bob
keys do you
Brown.
have?
Yeah. Billy Bob Brown makes a sarky comment, and it's like, well, you've just undercut everything that's just happened, and then they try and go straight back into, oh, and now we're on the run again, and our lives are in danger, and it just doesn't work at all.
I am so sick of this. I hope that they are uh, finally realizing that that's not how you do it. Like, I don't know. Like, I know it's easy to blame Marvel for kind of like bringing comedy into the action, but that was good. Like, depending on the context, again, like you can have a funny action sequence, but that moment was to establish Giancarlo Esposito as a very threatening force. That they had to do everything in their power to stop him, and in doing so, they locked themselves into the exclusion zone.
Yeah.
So, it was supposed to be a serious moment. And then every 2 seconds, they were, just making jokes. And as soon as they get there, there's like 30 seconds of desperation. Oh my God, we are in the exclusion zone. We can't ever get out of here. Like there's no way out. We are fucked. And then they get into a hangar, and they get up a big robot, and they just leave. And I'm like, that's not how you do it. Like, this is wrong. There's something wrong with this.
It's so true. Chris Pratt's actually saying that dialogue as he's opening the door to the hangar with their exit plan right in there that he knows about already. It's so fucking
You
dumb.
already have a way out. Like, I mean, it's not a way out, but it's a way to get somewhere. And so,
Yeah,
like,
yeah. We're hopeless. All we have is this massive fucking robot behind us.
there's nothing we can do. But we have a fucking robot that can take us anywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose there's a couple other. I mean, I made another couple notes about some things. My favorite bit of the film.
Oh, you have a favorite bit now.
My
Wow.
favorite bit has nothing really to do with the film itself. Have you seen Midnight Mass?
I did, and I love that show.
That's
So
it's an
good.
amazing show. Absolutely loved it. We had a little Midnight
Oh,
Mass
there
reunion here.
there were two actors from the Flanagan verse. Yes, I forgot about that. Raul Cooley and what's his name? They always play characters in Flanagan
He was
shows.
in Midnight Mass. It was the sheriff and it
Yeah,
was the mayor of the
yeah.
town. And they were in the scene right together with Stanley
And they
Tucci. And
are
I was
only
like,
in
this must
one
be
scene. That's why I forgot.
I was thinking this must be, it felt like a bit of a reference to Midnight Mass because, yeah, like you said, they're only in that one scene and they never appear again. And I was like, well, that was kind of bizarre.
It was bizarre. They're very good actors, and they usually have big roles in Flanagan projects. And I completely forgot about them. Yeah, it was so weird, and I feel like maybe they are on Netflix kind of like payroll because of Flanagan projects. So they were like, "Oh, we need two characters to do this scene. Let's get Raul Cooley and the other guy." Yeah,
Yeah, so
it
that
was.
was my favorite bit because it reminded me of Midnight Mass.
It reminded you of something good, and
Yeah.
that's what good things do. Um,
But yeah, other than that, there was there's another sort of note I made at the end, and I suppose this is just to do with the sort of uselessness of Chris Pratt's character
yeah,
in the story, and it's just before Millie Bobby Brown goes in to save her brother. They're doing like the assault on the headquarters of this corporation,
yeah.
and he's like, I'm gonna come with you, don't worry, we'll fight together, sort of thing. And she's like crying, she's like, when did you stop being an asshole? And he says, oh, I just got a haircut. And it's like, no, the story now requires you to stop being an asshole, so that's
There
what we'll
you
go
go.
with. Even though we've had no journey to get us here whatsoever.
Oh man, that's so true. And also, you reminded me of something that I wanted to say about Kiehui Kwan character,
Yeah.
right? The doctor, the doctor with glasses that they need to find, and they finally get to Doctor Exposition, where
Yeah.
he explains everything that we needed to know about the story, and it's hilarious. Like they are having this conversation, and I had to rewind a couple of times because I kept just like zoning out and not following what they were saying because it was so boring. But basically, at some point, they introduced this like big computer, which was actually really good design. I like the design with like the old monitor and the long legs with the wheels. And he introduces this computer. He's like, "Oh, this is a backup of everything I know. I recorded all these lines of dialogue for him. It's basically me." And I was like, okay, so next scene, you're going to die. And then they're gonna need some information from you, but you're gonna be dead. So they're gonna have to ask this robot, and that's exactly what happens. Just like
Yeah, yeah.
Giancarlo Esposito gets to there's this big action sequence. It's the low point, before the rise in the third act. Kia Hukan dies, and immediately after, like, okay, so computer, can you help us with this? Oh, of course, I have all the memories of this guy, let's go. And even talks like him, so it's just like the character. They needed someone to die to have that low moment, but they needed the character anyway, so they were like, okay, let's just make a backup of him on this robot, and let's just have him in the scene anyway. And that
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah, there's no stakes. There's no stakes to anything.
it was bad, man. It was really bad.
Yeah, and like
um
like you said, I think that the best redeeming quality is every now and again. I was looking at one of the sort of big action shots of all the robots fighting, and I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And I quite liked when they're using the old buses as like trebuchets at the end in that battle.
Oh yeah, totally. And
But again,
throwing
it's
refrigerators as well.
yeah, just purely on a spectacle level. I was like, well, and that's why I suppose you could say it had a bit of potential because of the world and the robots and all that stuff is there. There's just no characters or story here.
I feel like, I don't know, maybe this is a bit of a strong statement that I'm about to dish out, but maybe a Transformers movie has more substance than this. Like the first Transformers movie, for sure,
Yeah, no, I
is
prefer.
way
I haven't
better,
I haven't seen it for a very very long time, but there's
just
bits of
from
it.
memory.
There's bits of it that I still remember now, and I remember like Sheila Buff's like pretty good in that film.
Yeah, it's a decent
Um,
protagonist. He makes mistakes as
yeah.
well, which is unheard of today.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's completely a flawed character.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah, I,
stupid.
I bet if we were to watch that tonight, we would. Yeah, that's hands down a better film.
Yeah, man.
Let's not do
Let's do
that though.
that. Oh, come on. A big Transformers retrospective, could be fun.
Nice. I suppose. Well, yeah. What would you give the film out of 10 then?
I was looking at the IMDb, which I have here,
What is the
and
IMDb for it?
it's literally 6 out of 10.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
see, IMDb is usually fairly accurate. I'd say is one of the more accurate rating systems on there.
a 6 for this movie is exactly what this movie needs. Not because it's a decent film, because I don't think it is. It's not something that I will ever want to watch again. But it's just goes to show that it's a middle of the road film, very forgettable. Again, serviceable, inoffensive. It had a few moments where I was like, oh, this is almost kind of like a hint of something making sense, resembling like a good idea or a good feeling. But it's just, again, I will have forgotten what this movie is about in a month, and I will never watch it again. So it's, a six, I think, is fair.
Yeah. I'd maybe give it even a little bit less, but only like a 5 or 5.56. It's very much. It's either bang average or just slightly better on the merit of its visuals, etc.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Electric State. Electrifying movie.
There you go, and it'll be forgotten about forever.
So yeah, that was our review and discussion of the Electric State. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next one. Hopefully, you'll find podcast discussion, reviews, video essays, and interviews with filmmakers here on our channel. So don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, and keep up with all of our video content. See you soon, and welcome to the cult.